The New York Yankees are expected to aggressively pursue Tatsuya Imai. That's what we're reporting here at Fireside Yankees and EmpireSportsMedia.com. My full write-up on this report is available, again, on EmpireSportsMedia.com, and I'll leave a link in the description that allows you guys to check that article out. Again, EmpireSportsMedia.com. That's where that's at. That's affiliated with Fireside Yankees. And let's just dive straight into this video. Like, subscribe, do all that cool stuff. We'll do some promos later at the end of the video. I just want to jump right into this report. So what we're hearing in speaking to people with knowledge of the Yankees situation is that Tatsuya Imai is someone they very much like, is someone they very much want to bring in, and something I mentioned earlier in the offseason is that the Yankees really want to import a Japanese free agent onto their roster. They want to get back into the NPB market. They have missed time and time again over the last decade. They've been semi-interested in guys like Yoshida and Senga, not really that into Imanaga. Those are all guys who came over from the NPB to MLB, varying degrees of success. Senga and Yoshida have not had great successes of late. Senga probably peaked higher than any of those three guys, but Imanaga has probably been the best big leaguer to this point. But Yoshinori Yamamoto, that's probably the biggest miss for the Yankees. That's the guy I think they felt the best about and got the closest to actually acquiring, but he instead wanted to be a Los Angeles Dodger and ended up going there. Shohei Ohtani, they originally wanted to pursue in 2017. He did not have interest in being a New York Yankee. That is something that disappointed the organization severely. But as we look at the Yankee organization, we look at what they want to do, their priorities, where things lie with them. Tatsuya Imai fits them very well. They like the pitcher. They've scouted him for years. And kind of tying this all back to a want to get back in the Japanese market, they believe that NPB pitchers are the safest bet when it comes to transitioning from the NPB to MLB. There are just more things that are easier to project. You can measure their quality of stuff. You can measure those kinds of things, measure their command, see how big their miss rate is, all of that stuff, identify biomechanics and try and create some more efficiency and energy transfer, whatever it may be. But the Yankees like Imai. They believe he's going to be an impact player at the MLB level, and they would like to add to the rotation as well. So the Yankees are expected to aggressively pursue him, and I would believe that Imai is their number one pitching target or realistic pitching target of the offseason. I'm sure if School became available, he'd become everyone's number one, but based on realistic targets, realistic fits, Imai is their number one guy from my understanding. So this is someone they very much want. This is someone who they're going to be very involved in trying to acquire. And I do expect them to face some fierce competition from other teams. The Padres are one that I expect to be interested. The Blue Jays are another team that you would expect to be interested. I know Andy Martino, the Mets would be in, but not pedal to the metal in the way that they were with Yoshinobu Yamamoto. I wonder if they're after Imai seriously or not, but I do think they'll show at least some interest. There are other teams that would make sense for this. The Boston Red Sox make sense on paper, but for the New York Yankees, they're going to need to try and do something they haven't done since Masahiro Tanaka, and that's win a bidding war for an NPB player who they like. So as we break down Tatsuya Imai and talk about his profile, it's important to note that the NPB as a whole is a different kind of baseball league to Major League Baseball. It's easy to say just that the NPB doesn't have as much talent, and that's true. Major League Baseball has more money invested into infrastructure and player development. They produce better players. They produce more talent. That's why if you were to take the average NPB player and bring them over to MLB and have the average MLB player go over to the NPB, the average MLB player would have greater success in that transition. But with that being said, Imai is someone who I think profiles very well for Major League Baseball for a variety of reasons. Number one, he had a 6.8 innings pitched per start, which would be the highest mark for any qualified MLB starter this past season. Without the additional off day you get in the NPB in a 6-man rotation versus MLB, which usually we see 5-man rotations, Imai is going to have to adjust to pitching on less rest on a per start basis. But when we look at innings pitched per start, or the volume and the workload he's going to have on a per start basis, I'd be stunned if the Yankees push him to be a north of 6-inning guy on a per start basis. I think 6 would be the nice number, but a decrease in about almost a full inning per start is likely going to help offset that day off and that lack of a day off during the initial parts of the year. I also think when we look at the NPB, going from the NPB to Major League Baseball, the Yankees' depth in starting pitching that they'll have as the year goes on, as Schmidt, Cole, and Rodon all come back from injury, that is something that's going to allow the Yankees to address a workload issue for Imai in the middle of the year rather than worrying about it earlier in the year. There's also off days in the beginning of the year that will allow the Yankees to give him 5 days of rest versus 4 days of rest and keep him on that 6-man rotation for a little bit. But the Yankees are going to be able to get creative with this. I think that this is going to be a thing that affects them severely and affects their rotation plan. So that is why I think that Imai is a good fit from a volume standpoint, I'm pretty confident in saying that Imai is going to translate well in terms of workload and volume. Now, in terms of his swing and miss stuff, he had a 1.92 ERA this year, heavily driven by the fact that he struck out over 27% of batters faced in 2025. His swinging strike rate of 15.4% and his whiff percentage of 32% were the highest qualified marks for any NPB starter since the metrics began being tracked in 2014. Swinging strike rate is a metric I want to highlight in particular here. This is just total swings and misses divided by total pitches thrown. In the case of Imai and the case of some NPB starters, you would expect that number to decrease, but the number that we see that decrease by is not particularly large. Let's look at 4 recent NPB starters who came over from the Nippon Baseball League to Major League Baseball. That's Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shota Imanaga, Kodai Senga, and Tomoyuki Sugano. Yamamoto had a 0.9 point decrease in swinging strike rate from his last NPB season to his MLB career so far. In the case of Imanaga, it's been from 13.7% in his final NPB season to 13.3% in his first 2 MLB seasons. Both of these pitchers have dealt with arm injuries throughout their first 2 years, and the other thing I'd like to note is that they're stylistically very different pitchers. Yamamoto has a better fastball velocity, but much worse fastball shape. He has a deeper repertoire. Imanaga is more fastball splitter, so these are 2 different pitchers. Yamamoto is also a righty. Imanaga is a lefty. Kodai Senga and Tomoyuki Sugano are guys who have had sharper declines in swinging strike rate from the NPB to MLB. Senga went from a 13.7% swinging strike rate in his final NPB season to 12.2% in his MLB career, but he's had a slew of arm injuries and just finished his age 32 season where he dealt with injuries and saw a steep decline in swinging strike rate. Before 2025, it was a career 12.6% swinging strike rate. So even in an example where you have a guy who's oft injured, was oft injured in the Nippon Baseball League, it had concerns of being able to have his stuff hold up from the NPB to MLB due to those injuries, it's still a 1.5% swinging strike rate decrease. For example, we look at Yamamoto, we look at Imai, we look at Senga. Imai will come over at 27. Yamamoto's currently 27. Senga came over at 29, turning 30 in January. So Imai's going to come about 2.5 years younger than Senga was when he made his Major League debut. I do think that's important when we talk about initial MLB success and initial MLB swinging strike rates as well. Tomoyuki Sugano has dealt with the fewest injuries of this group, but he's only had 1 MLB season, and in his final NPB year, his swinging strike rate was just 9.9%. His swing and miss stuff had declined entirely. He was in his age 34 season. He comes over to MLB in his age 35 season, and it's still just a 2% decrease in swinging strike rate as a guy who had become a pitch to contact, super finesse command, not at all good stuff, doesn't have a good fastball at all, doesn't throw hard, sits around 92, doesn't have good shapes, just a very meh, bleh, not good back end starting pitcher type, signed for a very cheap deal, and he still only saw a 2% decrease in swinging strike rate as a 35-year-old making his MLB debut. So when we look at the range of decrease in swinging strike rate, I think the worst case scenario is a 2 to 2.5% decrease in swinging strike rate, and the best case scenario is a 0.5 to 1% decrease in swinging strike rate. So if we look at some best case scenarios at a 15.4% and we decrease it by about 0.5 to 1%, that gives us a 14.9% to 14.4% difference in swinging strike rate. And if you look at some guys who are in that range, you've got Zach Wheeler, Jacob deGrom, Christopher Sanchez, Paul Skeens, Spencer Strider, that was this past season, Garrett Crochet, also in that group. If we want to look at more extreme examples, a 2% decrease, that's about 13.4%, and let's say extend that to 12.9%, so 2% to 2.5%. That is Spencer Schwellenbach, Chris Bubick, Chris Sale, Freddie Peralta, Nathan Eovaldi, Yoshinobu Yamamoto. So these are still some pretty good swing and miss strikeout pitchers, and I think that Imai's ability to be in that group, and he's a big called strike guy too. Imai can get called strikes at a pretty high rate. It was around 15.6%. That's pretty good, all things considered. I think that we look at Imai as someone who can potentially come over to the big leagues and be a swing and miss arm, generate a ton of whiffs, be a strikeout machine, and be someone who the Yankees look at as one of their top swing and miss arms on the staff. Imai is someone who doesn't have overpowering velocity. It's about 95 miles per hour, but he releases from a very low release point and arm angle, and I think that's what makes him so interesting. The slider is a big swing and miss pitch. He's got 3 variations of an off-speed pitch. He's got a Vulcan change, a splitter, and a changeup. I think that's going to be fun as well. There's projectability with adding to the mix. Can you add a sinker? Can you add a cutter? I think those are things that we could see for Imai in his 2026 season as he jumps over from the NPB to MLB. He gets behind the ball very well, so I doubt he's going to be adding a sweeper. He's more of a Luis Castillo, Brian Wu low arm angle guy, not a Michael King, Will Warren kind of low arm angle guy. Those guys tend to get around the ball. These guys tend to get behind the baseball. So they're spinning it this way. Guys like King, they tend to kind of get around it a little more. So it's harder for Imai to create the shapes necessary to get around the baseball. Maybe the Yankees do some stuff with some seam shifted wake and get him to throw a sweeper. I know there are some guys like Clay Holmes who are more get behind or get around the ball or get inside the ball that have been able to develop sweepers. But higher arm slot guys, Imai again is a low arm slot guy. I'd be very stunned if he's able to figure out a way to throw a sweeper, but adding a sinker, a good two-seam. I know his fastball naturally has a lot of run, but something that has more depth and more sink, I think that's something that we could see for Imai. But for some contract projections, I think it's going to be around the $20 to $25 million range per year on a 6 or 7 year deal. He's 27 years old. He's not too old, so a 6-year deal would have him for his age 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, and 33 seasons. 7 years would be age 34. 8 years would add age 35. So a 6 or 7 year deal is pretty freaking good from a value standpoint to have the guy hitting free agency really at around when the peak, when he just passes the peak of his powers, when he's no longer the guy he once was, most likely. But I wonder what the Yankees are going to end up offering him. I wonder what other teams will offer him. It's going to be a very interesting free agent saga. But again, we're reporting here at Fireside Yankees. The Yankees will be heavily involved. They will be aggressively pursuing Tatsuya Imai. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, turn on that notification bell, and check out the links in the description to check out our other social media channels. We appreciate your continued support, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out, everybody.
Perfect.